Hi guys, welcome to this video where we're going to be looking at factoring. And the first method of factoring we're going to look at is the greatest common factor. Let me remind you what factors are. If you're looking for factors of 12, for example, ask yourself, which two numbers would you multiply and get 12? 1 and 12, right? Those are two numbers. You can also multiply 3 by 4 and get 12. You can also multiply 6 by 2 and get 12. So the factors of 12 will be, if you want to list them, it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12, right? What about factors of, let's say, 8? Which two numbers would you multiply to get 8? You can multiply 1 by 8, right? You can also multiply 2 by 4 and get 8, right? That is all. So meaning the factors of 8 will be 1, 2, 4, and 8. Now, if they tell you what's the greatest common factor between 8 and 12, you see how first of all, the common factors are 2 is common, 4 is common, right? Because here I'm also seeing 1, 2, and 4. But the highest common factor will be 4. Does that make sense? So we're going to be using the greatest common factor in this concept. And another thing I want you to remember is if you have unknowns, let's say if you have x to the power 2 and then x to the power 6, right? And these are two numbers. The greatest common factor of these two numbers is the lowest, right? X to the second will be, because you can always add on to get x to the 6. So I'm going to show you how that is going to make sense, right? So the first thing we're going to look at, we're given a number and we want to factorize or factor using the greatest common factor. So we have 8 and 36, yeah? What is the greatest common factor of 8 and 36? So we have 4, yeah, here if you multiply 4 by 2, okay, and here you also have 4 by 9, right? You'll get 36. So if I factor out 4, right, to get 8 inside, I'll be left with 2, such that if I multiply 4 by 2, I go back to 8. M will come here because if you look at the unknowns, they are not common. So they retain their position. And then because I'm factoring out 4, right, I'll be left with 9 here. So 9n. So here we're going to look at the constants. Always first look at the constants. If you look at these constants, what will you multiply? What is the greatest common factor? This should be 4, right? 1 times 4. So 1 times 4 gives you 4. What about this one? The greatest common factor will be 4 and 6, right? So are you saying 4 is common, right? So you take 4 out. What about y? This is y squared and this is y. The greatest common factor will be y, right? So we're factoring out 4y. And then inside here, we'll be left with 1 because the 4 is out. So 1y. So y minus, and here we'll be left with 6, right? Ask yourself, when you distribute, do you go back to this? Let's try to distribute and see if we go back to this. 4y times y, you'll end up with 4y squared. 4y times 6, you'll end up with 24y. So you go back to that, right? So this is the greatest common factor. So always think about what's the greatest common factor. Let's look at 18, yeah? What's the greatest common factor between 18 and 48? So this 18, we can break it down by 6 times 3, and here applying 6 by 8. So when you factor out 6, here you'll be left with 3. When you factor out 6, here you'll be left with 8. Now let's look at the unknowns. The trick is the lowest exponent of the unknown. A, here we have a squared and a. So you factor out a. Good. B and b. So you factor out b, common. C squared and c cubed. You factor out c squared. And then remember that greatest common factor here will be 6. All right. So remember here in the constants, we're left with 3, right? And we have a outside, so we're left with 1a. B, we factored it out. We don't need another b. C squared, we factored it out, minus. So here we factored out 6 and we're left with a. We have a outside, we have b outside, so we don't need that. C squared, here we'll be left with c, right? So the answer is 6ab c squared into 3a minus 8c. That's what you'll be left with. Okay, what if we have 3 terms here, right? It's still the same thing. Here, the greatest common factor will be here. You multiply 2 times 3, you multiply 2 and 7. So are you seeing 2 and 5 to get 10? 2 and 7 to get 14, 2 and 3 to get 6. And then because all these are y's, the greatest common, where would you pass to get to y4? That should be y squared. So you factor out 2y squared, and then here you'll be left with 3, right? 3y to the second plus 7y minus 5, right? Please feel free to pause this video and replay it as many times as you want to get the concept, because we're going to need it in the following videos. But thank you for watching. See you in my next video. Bye.